Call to order the August 15th meeting of the Cary Town Council. And at this time, I'll recognize Councilmember George for our ceremonial opening.
Surely, usually this time of year, we come upon Lazy Days, and it's the Thursday right before Lazy Days, and we have the town crier with us. But unfortunately, this year, Lazy Days, we have an extra week to wait. But
Oh, yay.
I was going to let you do it tonight. Oh, yay. But we do have with Markham, Ontario, Canada, the town crier. He'll be here before Lazy Days, and we're going to have a reception. They'll be at the Maiden Inn from 6 to 7:30, and he'll be in his all regalia. So Friday night, just before Lazy Days, come on out and check it out, and you can hear the oh yay from the guy who knows how to do it. So let's stand and do our pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First order of business is to adopt the agenda. I would entertain a motion at this time.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second discussion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. And that takes us to recognitions, reports, and presentations. And I'll turn it over now to our town manager for his update.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I'll be brief. The downtown library parking deck, just added to your calendars today is the joint Cary-Wake County ribbon cutting for the Cary Library. It will be on Sunday, November 3rd at 2 p.m. And we expect the parking deck to open a week or so before. But if it opens a little bit later than that, remind everyone that the county is in charge of the construction. So if it opens early, it's because we got it open early. No, I'm just kidding.
Very good. Thank you.
You bet.
We now move to the public speaks out portion of our meeting. We've included instructions for speaking at public speaks out on the printed agenda. And if you'd like to speak at public speaks out, I would ask that you take a seat to my right and follow the instructions on the agenda. Public speaks out speakers have 3 minutes each for their comments, and speakers may speak on any topic as long as it's not a public hearing topic, and that actually works to your benefit because you get more time at a public hearing. The 3-minute time limit will be enforced, not to be rude, but to be fair to all of our speakers. We have a timer on the podium, and when the green light turns to a yellow light, that means you have 30 seconds remaining. And when the yellow light turns into a flashing red light, that's the point I will interrupt you. Not trying to be mean, again, just trying to be fair. To help have an efficient public speaks out portion of our meeting, I would ask that if you are here with a group, that you have a spokesperson for that group and speak on behalf of the entire group. That would reduce repetitive comments. I would also ask that if you're speaking after the person that's currently speaking, that you stand in the stairway there so that, one, we know we have another speaker, and two, we can be more efficient and use the public speaks out time wisely, because there is a 1-hour time limit. I thank everyone in the audience for understanding that this is a business meeting. Please do not applaud, make remarks from your seats, or anything else that may be distracting from this meeting. So now is the time for public speaks out, and I would invite our first speaker forward.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. My name is Harvey Richmond, and I serve as the co-chair of the Conservation Committee for the local Sierra Club group, the Capital Group. The Capital Group of the Sierra Club has thousands of members in Wake County and supporters, including Cary. I am here tonight on behalf of that group. First, I want to commend the Cary Environmental Advisory Board for developing a series of recommendations for reducing carbon emissions for the Town Council to consider. The EAB has spent nearly a year developing these recommendations. I and other members of the Sierra Club attended a March 12th, 2019 meeting of the board where they unanimously adopted those carbon emission reduction strategies. It has been over 5 months since the EAB's recommendations were adopted. I and other members of the Sierra Club would like to know what the status is of the committee's board's carbon emission reduction plan. Does the council plan to take up the plan and recommendations, and if so, when? Climate change and its impacts on humans and the natural environment are accelerating every year. This past June was globally the hottest month on record. Time is of the essence, and Cary needs to be moving forward on climate change. We urge the council to bring forth this EAB document for consideration in the next 30 days. We also want to commend the EAB's Tree Advisory Committee for its work in developing the recommendations to protect Cary's tree canopy, and are happy to see those recommendations coming before the council this evening. We encourage Cary to join other cities, towns, and counties in challenging Duke Energy's proposed path forward, which includes a massive increase in fracked gas as our source for electricity and heating. Duke Energy's long-term strategy will have the impact of offsetting much of all of the progress that the town makes in reducing greenhouse gas emissions. In addition to hopefully supporting the EAB's recommendations for reducing carbon emissions, we urge the council to ask staff and the EAB to take the lead in developing a strategic energy or climate action plan, as the city of Charlotte did last December and the city of Raleigh is currently working on. We also call on the town of Cary to involve a wide range of stakeholders in developing such a plan and be sensitive to environmental justice and environmental equity considerations. I've included several resources, including the link to the Wake County 100% Clean Energy Resolution and the town of Apex, as well as the Charlotte Action Plan in the copy of my remarks that I've provided the council tonight. Thank you for allowing me the time tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Richmond. Next speaker, please.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm here to talk about the proposed expansion of the Searstone Retirement Community.
Could you give us your name, please, for the record?
My name is Vern Pike.
Thank you, sir.
I'm a Wake Forest graduate and a retired Army colonel. In 2005, my wife and I made a decision to plan to leave our home in Pinehurst and relocate to the Triangle area, seeking a continuing care retirement community. After visiting many such facilities in the Triangle over the next 10 months, we were impressed with Bill Sears' vision for an active retirement community on his Cary property. And in 2006, we became depositors in Searstone. We remained with Searstone through the recession of 2008-2009 and the financial crises facing the development of 2010 and 2011. Searstone finally achieved the 70% commitment required by the Department of Insurance to obtain financing, and we attended the groundbreaking ceremony in June of 2012 and saw reality finally emerge from frustration and multiple plan changes. We finally moved from Pinehurst into Searstone in April 2014. We stuck with Searstone through 8 years of uncertainty and frustrations, and we're glad we did. Searstone is a wonderful community of very active former corporate executives, entrepreneurs, university professors, businessmen, and military and religious leaders. We saw early on the need for Searstone to expand to remain viable. Earlier this year, the residents were briefed on and overwhelmingly approved a Phase 2 expansion that will provide significant improvements to the current complex. 1, a significant increase in green space throughout the development. 2, connectivity between the existing clubhouse and new structures. 3, open areas on campus for activities such as walking trails and sports, and complexes such as pickleball and bocce courts. 4, reduction in traffic density through the community, a biggie for those of us that live there. And 5, it provides growth to ensure financial stability. We're excited at having the flexibility to change activities on the outdoor areas of our campus, depending on the wishes of both Samaritan, the owners, and the residents. We have high standards. For us, flexibility is important for sustaining and protecting our community. We seniors today have more active interest than our predecessors, and future generations may have other interests. Having flexibility is smart planning for the future of Searstone, and we hope you agree. At the council meeting in July, you were provided a letter from our association president encouraging approval of the plan. As a longtime depositor and resident of Searstone, I urge your future approval of the plan to expand our home. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Mr. Mayor, council members, my name's Landon Neiman, and I can't say I ride seat anymore because they changed the name on me. But last month marks my 25th year living in Cary, and it was 25 years. I've seen a lot of changes, most of them positive, in particular the changes to the transit system, but a couple negative. When I first moved down here, people used to actually stop for people in the crosswalks. Now not so much. But the biggest thing is how much of the tree canopy has disappeared since I first moved down here. And I just like to say, with all the development going on, if there's any way to try and keep the canopy that's left, we really need to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Sarah Williams. I am a professional counselor, a resident of Cary, and I recently founded a nonprofit in North Carolina called the ESTEAM program. The ESTEAM program is a highly interactive 10-lesson curriculum that takes a deep dive into helping young girls embrace their self-esteem and self-worth. This program caters to middle school and high school girls throughout the entire Triangle area. Our pilot launched this January through June, and it helped increase 98% of all participants' confidence, self-esteem, and self-efficacy. I was motivated to create this program for two reasons. Number one, most of the issues that exist in our society stem from lack of self-esteem within ourselves, whether it's drug abuse, addiction, high pregnancy rates, even violence has been connected to a lack of self-worth. When you think about those issues and you think about someone knowing their self-worth and loving their self, it's very difficult for those issues to exist. So this is why a program like this is very important. Secondly, I've had to overcome and heal some of my own self-worth issues as a young woman, and I wish a program like this existed when I was growing up. So currently, I'm seeking two things. One is financial backing to continue this program. We are relaunching September 21st, and the participants are from all over the Triangle area, just like our pilot. Secondly, I'm looking to partner with school systems and larger nonprofits who may be interested in having the STEAM program as a part of their programming. We were recently featured on WRAL, and we will be on ABC News in a couple of weeks. And so if you guys can help with those two matters, I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. My name is Joan DeBruin, and I live at the Searstone Retirement Community and have been there for the last 3 years. I'm here this evening on behalf of my fellow residents to voice our support for the zoning request made by Samaritan Housing for Phase 2 at Searstone. Our residents feel strongly that we need Phase 2 in order to complete our community. Our input was sought and actually included in the designs for the plans for Phase 2. This proposed design greatly increases our green space and provides wonderful areas where we can easily walk and gather as a community to enjoy a wide range of activities. The Phase 2 plan of 2 four-story residential apartment buildings, connected by a dramatically stunning 2-story building, fulfills our need for additional dining options, more activities and meeting spaces, a new multi-purpose auditorium that will far exceed our current ballroom's capabilities. We believe the completion of Phase 2 by Samaritan Housing will adhere to Cary's high standards and those of our residents. Cary and Wake County do actually benefit from Searstone. Since 2014, we have contributed over $2.5 million through June of this year. This is to benefit the indigent elderly in Wake County through our charitable outreach program. We project our annual giving will increase from over $550,000 per year to over $750,000 per year after Phase 2 is completed and occupied. Significant annual support actually goes to 7 charities that are based right here in Cary. Plus, many of our residents volunteer at the charities that we support. Already, we provide event space to other organizations, such as the USO Volunteer Barbershop Chorus, and, oh, I'm sorry, I messed that up, excuse me. The USO Volunteer Appreciation Luncheons, the Toys for Tots Kickoff Campaign, the Cary Oak City Sound Men's Barbershop Chorus, to name a few. Additionally, the Cary Art League exhibits year-round in our clubhouse, much to our delight. Phase 2 will allow a wider range of spaces for other organizations to use. Thank you for your time and your service to the Cary community, and I hope you will give serious consideration to supporting our request on Phase 2 of Searstone. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council, Mr. Manager. My name is David Schaus, and I'm here to speak in complete support of a report that is coming to you later in the meeting from the Environmental Advisory Board on tree recommendations. I would like to urge the Council and Manager to consider the support for all the items in this report. Specifically, I would like to urge you to consider the opportunity for human resources that would include an urban forester and a certified arborist positions in future budgets. I had the privilege to share an office cubicle with Raleigh's urban forester when Hurricane Fran hit. That is, when he was in the office. I found during that event and in subsequent years that that person and that knowledge base reaped tremendous benefits for the city of Raleigh. The person and the arborist group was a valuable resource for in-house evaluation of plans, projects, developing public relations, and numerous volunteer tree plantings, which, as we all know, have a whole lot of other benefits simply besides putting a tree in the ground. The Environmental Advisory Board also includes an urban forester or forest master plan. And while a recent 2016% of canopy study is very valuable, that's a very large-scale measure and has limited ability to implement specific projects. Having a reliable in-house subject matter expert is an excellent idea. A staff person can supervise an inventory of city-owned trees, and yes, the town does own those trees and has responsibility for those trees. He or she can provide immediate input on plans, projects, and storm recovery in the town's best interest. Thanks for your attention and your future attention on that matter.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, city manager. My name is William Rosenberg, and I'm here for two reasons. First of all, I'm a resident of Cary at 508 Queensferry Road in McGregor Downs. And in that regard, I've been engaged in a multi-year fight with the golf course, who wants to tear down 40 100 to 200-year-old trees that happen to be the barrier between my house and the golf course. I have communicated with your development people, and I just wanted to bring that to your attention. I don't know where that fits into your thinking, but your office has the lawsuit and the complaints and the engineering studies and whatever. The second reason I'm here, I'm partners with Dr. David Cook, who is right there. He's a practicing neurologist, and we have a building at 1219 Walnut Street, just several houses down in the residential area, right adjacent to the town center. And at this point, we oppose going forward with the plan until we can see what the environmental impact would be of that high-density project, what will be the impact on traffic, and the other information.
Yeah, this item is on a public hearing, so we can't let you talk about that.
Okay, I thought that.
But you can come back and talk about that.
Back today, or?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
We're going to have a public hearing on that. If you like to talk about anything else, it's not a public hearing.
No, that's it.
Okay. We'll welcome you back. I'll call on you first. Anyone else to speak at Public Speaks Out? Anyone at all? Seeing no one, will close public speaks out. And before we move to public hearings, we have the consent agenda, which is item 4, if you're following along. For the benefit of people watching our meeting on TV, I'm going to take a moment to review the consent agenda items. On the consent agenda, we have minutes, 19A03 Vincent DeFreitas annexation, 19A08 Johnson annexation, 19A09 North Carolina Exteriors LLC annexation, interlocal agreement number 3 for Town of Apex Colvin Park Pump Station Sewer Services. I would ask at this time if council members would like any of these items pulled for discussion. If not, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
There's a motion.
Second.
And a second. Discussions. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. And that takes us to public hearings. The rules for public hearings are exactly the same as public speaks out, with one exception. Speakers now have 5 minutes for their comments instead of 3. And our first public hearing is on the Cary Town Center Plan. And I will call on, I saw you standing there, Mr. Berry, but I wanted to make sure it was you. Call on our Planning, Inspections, and Development Services Director, who's going to introduce this item. Council will not take action on this item this evening. Instead, we're going to hold a work session on August 29th and talk about this item. Then, following the work session, the item will be referred to our Planning and Zoning Board for their review and recommendation, and we will see this at a future date. Mr. Berry.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Katie Dry and I are excited to introduce the public hearing for the redevelopment of the Cary Town Center. As part of our presentation tonight, we'll give a brief history of this piece of property, discuss the relationship between this project and our Imagine Cary community plan, and of course provide details of the rezoning. So you kind of stole my thunder, Mayor. Before we get started, I was going to talk about the schedule, but you just mentioned that. This project was introduced, was submitted April 15th. There have been 2 neighborhood meetings, one in June and one earlier this month. And we'll have a public hearing tonight, obviously, and then a work session on August 29th. So growing up in the 80s, when I think of malls, I think of shopping for cassette tapes. I think of playing them in the video arcades. I think of eyeing a new pair of Air Jordans. And I think many of us have similar memories. That mall experience was pioneered by architect Victor Gruen. And he designed the first enclosed mall, Southdale Center, which opened in Minnesota in 1956. Gruen's concepts worked by having name brand stores anchoring the ends of the mall, which would promote traffic to the smaller stores in between. His vision was to get people out of their cars, and his design included gathering places where people would socialize while they shopped. And around the same time, the indoor mall concept was first starting, a new federal tax law was enacted, which favored mall development. At its peak, over 100 malls were built annually. Cary Town Center, which at the time was called Cary Village Mall, followed this national trend. Cary Village Mall opened in February of 1979. In the early 90s, the mall expanded to add several new anchor stores, which increased the building area to approximately 1.1 million square feet. Today's mall retains much of the similar concepts that were part of the Southdale Center in 1956, with large anchors being necessary to drive foot traffic to the interior of the stores. But times have changed. Online shopping has become mainstream. The number of malls constructed in the 70s and 80s created significant regional competition. Consumers are looking for more authentic experiences, and retail sales have shifted to either lower end or discount retailers or upper end or luxury retailers. So sales for mid-range retailers, which represent many of the traditional big box stores, have slowed. As anchor stores close, mall space sits idle and foot traffic declines. So the need to evolve was not lost on the owners of the Cary Town Center, and we've seen requests, y'all have seen requests for an entertainment venue, a very big box retailer, rezoning for just a portion of the mall. And in January of 2019, the mall was sold to Turnbridge Equities, a real estate investment and development firm headquartered in New York City. And while the mall was making plans, so were we. As part of the Imagine Cary Community Plan, the Eastern Cary Gateway sets a vision for this area. It takes advantage of its location, future regional transportation, and land development potential. And we're starting to see a number of exciting things happen in the Gateway. Fenton Development was approved, and I'm pleased to say that just this week, the initial review of the development plans for Fenton has started. The Triangle Aquatic Center has permission for expansion of their parking, building, and an additional pool, and work on this expansion will start next month. And staff continues to work on bus rapid transit. So overall, momentum in the Eastern Cary Gateway is building. We have been able to capitalize on this momentum, utilizing our knowledge and experience to facilitate our work in reviewing this rezoning request. And because this is a large redevelopment site, it offers a unique opportunity to apply creative solutions. While we are still working on a variety of items with the developer, including pedestrian and bike access, review of the design guidebook, creative solutions to stormwater, and transportation, we look forward to the next step in this process to gather public feedback. Katie Dry will now provide an overview of this request.
Thank you, Scott. Mayor and Council, we are excited to present to you the rezoning for the Cary Town Center Mall. This project is for the entire mall site, 87 acres, which is currently built with 1.1 million square feet of commercial building space and almost 5,000 parking spaces, all surface parking. The rezoning will redevelop the underperforming mall site into a mixed-use development. Key commitments include redeveloping the aging mall and surface parking into a series of development blocks, introducing new land uses and a new street grid. Development program will include up to 1.2 million square feet of office, 360,000 square feet of commercial, 450 hotel rooms, and 1,800 residential units, with buildings that could be up to 12 floors in height in certain areas. 70% of the parking will be accommodated in parking decks, and there will be at least 2 acres of community gathering spaces on the site. The redevelopment request is to rezone the mall from general commercial conditional use and MXD to the mixed-use district. This zoning district requires a preliminary development plan, and it allows an applicant to set their own dimensional standards and propose alternative development standards from the LDO requirements. The standards are all listed in the preliminary development plan, which is shown here. This plan creates 19 development blocks, and although a mix of uses are allowed in most blocks, there will be predominant land uses associated with these blocks. Blocks 1 through 4 will be predominantly office and institutional. Blocks 5 through 6 will be commercial. This will be the retail core of the site. 7 through 15 will allow for office and residential. And as we transition towards the eastern portion of the property, the predominant land use will become residential. Building heights will range between 3 to 12 floors on the western half of the site, with the exception of the retail core, which may hold some one-story buildings to facilitate a human-scale shopping experience. The heights will transition down to 3 to 6 floors towards the eastern half of the site. The development program has minimum and maximum land use allotments, which would enable up to 1.2 million square feet of office, 360,000 square feet of commercial, 450 hotel rooms, and 1,800 residential units. With this development, there is a new street grid that's proposed, and it's proposing 3 types of street corridors. The blue corridor will facilitate vehicles and bicycles. This corridor has separated bicycle paths. The purple route focuses on pedestrian travel and follows the retail core of the site. The gold corridor is designed to serve the residential portion, and it's intended for slower traffic. Street side trails, which are shown here in red, would be along Maynard Road and along the eastern portion of the property line. Both of these will connect to future greenways to the north and to the south. As previously stated, the existing mall site has almost 5,000 surface parking spaces, and the redevelopment proposes that 70% of the parking will be in parking decks. The redevelopment project presents an opportunity to improve existing stormwater runoff, as the current mall was built prior to any stormwater regulations. Staff is exploring opportunities with the applicant to address stormwater management options. An evaluation of the surrounding road network studied 18 intersections, including site access points, within 1 mile of the site. The traffic study recommended improvements at 9 intersections, 6 of which the applicant will be improving. Staff is working with the applicant for opportunities to consider intersection improvements at Cary Town Center, or at Cary Town Boulevard and Maynard and Walnut. Staff is also working with the applicant on pedestrian considerations in this area. Design, architecture, and signage will be governed by a design guidebook, which is submitted as a zoning condition for this project. This guidebook will give us an idea of the look and the feel of the proposed development, and it proposes alternative development standards from the Town of Cary's Community Appearance Manual and the town sign requirements. These pictures are just a few examples from the design guidebook. The plan proposes 20-foot streetscapes along Cary Town Boulevard and Maynard, and 10-foot streetscapes along Walnut Street, and no streetscapes are proposed within the internal streets. The existing berm and buffer adjacent to the Ivy Meadows neighborhood will be retained. So this completes our description of the rezoning. Next, I'll share a preliminary analysis of the Cary Community Plan. As Scott noted, this site is within the Eastern Cary Gateway Special Planning Area, which is a destination and a gateway forming the entrance to Cary from Raleigh and from other cities to the east. The plan envisions Eastern Cary Gateway as a high-density destination center that will foster businesses through high-quality design and a connected mix of uses. For this project, staff will continue the evaluation as the case moves through the process, and our preliminary review finds that the project furthers 3 of the overall policies which apply to the Eastern Cary Gateway area. This includes fostering mixed-use developments, improving the visual experience of the gateway corridors, and in this case, that would be Cary Town Boulevard, focusing on connectivity within and between developments. And within the Eastern Cary Gateway area, Cary Town Center is identified as a mixed-use center, commercial-based focus area. The plan gives specific guidance for this particular area. The plan states, specifically for Cary Town Center, that this area is ripe for redevelopment, that redevelopment should use compact and vibrant forms. It also states that large parking lots provide redevelopment opportunities to create small blocks, mixed uses, and public spaces, that there should be context-sensitive transitions to the adjacent residential neighborhood, and that development should have a range of mixed uses. 2 neighborhood meetings have been held for the Cary Town Center site. First was a required meeting facilitated at the town hall, and the applicant held a second neighborhood meeting on August 7th. Themes we are hearing range from general inquiries about redevelopment, including wanting to know how quickly the project will be moving forward. There's been questions about whether the existing berm adjacent to the Ivy Meadows neighborhood will remain, and it will. Questions about pedestrian and greenway connections and opportunities, and questions about traffic on Walnut Street at existing neighborhood entrances. For the public hearing tonight, the town of Cary sent notice to property owners within 800 feet of the site. This practice exceeds the state requirements of notifying adjacent property owners. So this concludes staff's presentation. The applicant's representative, Jamie Schwedler with Parker Poe, is here to share comments. And as Scott Berry mentioned earlier, a work session will be held on August 29th to discuss the case in more detail. Thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me. At this time, I would like to invite the applicant forward for their remarks.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. I'm Jamie Schwedler with Parker Poe at 301 Fayetteville Street in Raleigh. I'm here on behalf of the Cary Town Properties new owner. The mall is now owned by Turnbridge Equities and a development partner, and we have representatives here tonight. I'm joined specifically by Mr. Ryan Nelson with Turnbridge Equities, by Alan Ward with Sasaki, our master planner, and our local team of Bob Zumwalt with McAdams and Kevin Dean with Kimley Horn. We are simply thrilled to be here tonight presenting this exciting rezoning request in what feels like the new frontier for Cary, the Eastern Cary Gateway. The staff has been working with us, and this team has been working on this project for over 9 months, and there's been a lot of work and collaboration with the staff, and I think you'll see that the plan reflects those comments and the interaction that we've had to date, and we look forward to further tweaking the plan as we go through the process tonight. The owner purchased the 75-acre site back in January and then recently acquired the additional 11 acres for Dillard's last month. So we now have control of 87 acres of the entire area with just some minor exceptions for out parcels, which really gives us a chance to bring this vision forward. Scott did a great job of summarizing the history of the mall and its evolution and where the physical forms and layout of the mall really followed consumer demands. But today, those consumers are passing enclosed single-story malls in favor of goods they can purchase online or in modern centers with outdoor spaces and vibrant experiences. With this zoning request, we are seeking to create such a project to breathe new life into an area that is primed for rebirth. This request seeks to complement the momentum that you have already experienced in the Gateway and offer a very different experience, a new urban grid concentrating on office and residential use supported by commercial, so that we truly have a place not only to shop, dine, and eat, but also live, linger, play, and stroll. And to do that, we hired Sasaki, an internationally recognized landscape architecture firm who's completed nationwide projects of revitalization and downtown places, making specialized, innovative urban spaces. Some of them include Reston Town Center in Virginia, the memorials on our National Mall, the Reedy River project in Greenville, South Carolina, and closer to home, the newly reimagined Moore Square project. Their vision for this site focused on placing the greatest density and heights closer to Cary Town Boulevard and Maynard, and then transitioning those heights away from that corner down toward the southeast of the site. So the lowest density would be adjacent to the Cary Town, or to the Ivy Meadows neighborhood. And what that did was allow us to put the office use in where it should be, in the highest visibility and closest to the highway, and then transition to a residential use that's closer to the existing use. So I'd like to go back into Katie's slides and show you. Maybe I might be here. Oh, there we go. Oh, let's get to 26.
All right, meeting's over.
Don't go into
So
closed
moved.
session. Okay.
I love that slide.
So I'll pick up where Katie left off and described so well. That vision for the mall focused on this transition of density and height from the northeast to the south, the northwest to the southeast, and it evolved in what Katie described so well. The office and institutional uses, blocks 1 through 4, would be concentrated toward the northeast end of the site. A new urban grid with 19 blocks overall would have 3 primary uses. The office, that you see here in blue, blocks 1 through 4. The commercial in blocks 5 and 6, which include a central urban plaza and a large civic green. Blocks 7 through 15 is represented in green here, which would have flexibility to be office, institutional, or residential. And then the yellow blocks you here see it would be blocks 16 through 19 would be primarily residential. And each of those 3 types, office, commercial, and residential, has specific permitted uses that will be included in the PDP. And then each of the 19 blocks are broken down into a specific land use category that includes additional commitments on how this new urban grid would be formed. Commitments about minimum and maximum heights, primary and secondary uses, the amount of the secondary uses that would be allowed in each block, and then, where appropriate, specific notes for each block that talk about the special character of that block. For example, Block 1 at the northwest corner of the site is committed to have a building on the corner to really anchor that and become a marquee entranceway, whereas the existing area for the Belks is allowed to have either an option for Belks to remain in their lease, they have a long-term lease on the property, or should they choose to leave the site, we would be able to go a little bit higher. And the density corresponds to each of those blocks in a way that's appropriate for each of them. These heights generally affect the original vision that Sasaki came up with having that higher density. As Katie described, the blocks are generally 3 to 12 floors with variety that slopes down, then wrapped around a human-scale urban core that is largely 1 level and blanketed by lower heights for the residential to the transition next to the Ivy League neighborhood. Excuse me. The team has found that architectural scale, treatment, and variety is imperative to successful revitalization projects. And to capture that vision, we plan to deliver a design guidebook, as Katie mentioned, that commits to specific varieties of treatments that the various cores and their components could have. The selection you see on your screen is showing the urban core framed by office and how investing in site features can have an impact on the potential of a street or space. Walkability and connectivity are also important to reinvigorate this Grayfield site. So the three main cores, office, residential, and commercial, are designed to be within a 5-minute walk of one another. We also created specific streetscapes that Katie mentioned within the site to define the street experience. And as she mentioned, those streetscapes are meant to interplay with the type of core that we're dealing with. So the core closest to the commercial, the orange on your screen, is the dashed purple line. That's a streetscape that's more pedestrian focused, whereas the blue dashed line is more vehicular focused to get traffic through the site. And then the orange streetscape is also vehicular in nature, but deals more at a local scale, a residential scale, that's appropriate to the scale and context. Commitments in the PDP also include trails, bicycle facilities, and to protect the main corridors from surface parking. As Katie mentioned, we had a great neighborhood meeting. We scheduled another one last week to go over and follow up on some of the comments that the neighbors had. Katie did a great job summarizing there largely how quickly can we move through the process, what the traffic impacts would be, how the berm would be impacted, if at all, and how the traffic patterns would impact some existing situations they have going on. I'd like to just touch briefly on some issues we continue to explore. With respect to stormwater and sustainability, we're very aware that this is a large impervious site, and we're taking measures to try to combat against that existing gray field and make it much better. We're proposing densities that match the Eastern Cary Gateway, but we're also proposing to put 2 acres of open space back on the site. And we're doing it in a way that's committed to 10 individual areas throughout the site that will allow to put impervious areas interspersed through that area instead of just clumping it at the edges of the site where it is today. That 2-acre commitment is 17 times the LDO requirement for a site of this size, so it's a significant investment. We're also placing over 1,000 new trees within this new grid, which is a representative of over 150% of the existing tree count that's on the site today. And again, much more interspersed throughout the grid because they'll be on streets along the grid instead of grouped in different areas along the edges. Katie mentioned traffic, the 6 improvements we've committed to making, and we'll continue to discuss those with staff. But I'd ask you to keep in mind that because the numbers that we're required to compare to are as to a fully operating mall, the traffic impacts and their time of day are very different than what a regional mall would have been when the site was designed. Our numbers are actually projected to decrease trips in the peak hours and increase slightly in the morning hours because we're putting office back on site. So you have people using the site in a different way. Our distribution is also different because the office is focused on the northern part of the site. Over 40% of our trips are distributed to that entrance, whereas the entrance on Walnut Street will only have about 27% of the trips, and then Maynard will have even less. So we've designed the site and we've committed to working with traffic in a way that will get people into that parking area to support the office quickly and off of Cary Town Boulevard, and then treat the other intersections in an appropriate manner. We're also aware of the concern over not only existing issues with Ivy Lane traffic, but off-site pedestrian circulation with the high school and how pedestrians might interact with the site. Because those are existing issues, we've been talking with staff about what the town's plans have been for that and what they've been doing to combat those issues, and we'll continue to do that as we move through the process. Phasing wasn't mentioned, but we have had a lot of questions about how quickly it can go and what's first. Our phasing was designed to get that urban core and the Main Street pedestrian facility in the earlier phase, with some of the residential followed by the office as our residential comes along. And so what you'll see in the phasing plan is a very strong upfront commitment in the commercial core with about 1/4 of our residential entitlement, and then the phases go through adding another 1/4 of residential as well as office, so that we commit to half of our office entitlement by the 3rd phase, which is over 600,000 square feet of office. In sum, the Eastern Cary Gateway said it best. Cary's aging commercial centers represent some of the most important opportunities for commercial infill and redevelopment in the town. We're committed to continuing to work with the town, staff, and the public to respond to suggestions, and we expect to continue to make tweaks as this process continues. But what you see before you tonight represents a tremendous amount of work, investment, and commitment to bring a very high-quality urban center to Cary in a way that exceeds the expectations of the Imagine Cary plan. Thank you very much, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. We may call on you later. So before we open the public hearing, I want to go over a few things that might help. If this is your first time here, if you're new to this process, welcome. This is a rezoning public hearing, and what that means is we're looking at the type of use, and that's why you see these boxes. And we're not talking about how things look. That is called a site plan, and that would come after the zoning is approved, if it is approved. Now, some people also think that the town council proposes things. No, we're just like you. We look at things, we hear things, we evaluate things. So in the process so far, the applicant has gone to the staff has provided feedback, and they've made changes. The applicant has also, I think, met with each individual council member to get their initial thoughts, and I gave feedback. Now, my understanding is those thoughts aren't in what we're seeing tonight. I'm looking. So they're not in there tonight. So we've given initial thoughts. But a very important part of this process is to hear what the public thinks about their proposal. And once we gather that, we'll give other feedback at our work session. And then it goes to Planning and Zoning Board, and they give their feedback. And all of that information will come to us at a later date with more specifics. And at that point, we're going to make a decision. So there's a long ways to go in this process, and a lot of information to gather and a lot of things to hear. And I wanted to make sure everyone understood that before I open the public hearing, because it's very important what you have to say, and we're really interested in hearing what you have to say. So having said that, now is the time for the public hearing for 19 RZ11 Cary Town Center PDP, and I would invite our first speaker forward. Oh, I promised Mr. Rosenberg he would be our first speaker. So Mr. Rosenberg, if you would please come back to the podium.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Absolutely.
As I said, I live on Queens Ferry Road, and I'm also a partner in 1219 Walnut Street, right 5 or 6 houses from the mall, with Dr. David Cook, who is a practicing neurologist and is quite concerned about the impact of the traffic and the environment on that general residential area, which has been identified as Ivy area. Previously, I served under President George H.W. Bush as the Assistant Administrator for Clean Air at EPA. So I'm quite familiar with air impacts. And what I haven't heard is any studies that have done an environmental impact study of exactly what will be put into the atmosphere that will affect the residential population and the Cary area generally. And this has been described by the developer as a high-density project, so there's going to be impacts. And we need to know what they are specifically, not in general terms, but to be able to read the studies. An environmental impact statement requires the applicant to identify the potential issue and discuss pros and cons. It's a very complicated document that enables the public generally to understand what's going to happen in their area, and this is right in the middle of a residential area in Cary. It's also right next to a school, and that's another issue to be considered in an environmental impact statement. I mentioned the school because there's an alternative here. This is one of the biggest pieces of property in Cary that, was developed when Cary was little. And there's a growing demand for public services, whether they be government, maybe educational, recreational services. And I would hope that before any action is taken, that the council asked the professional staff, your development staff, to lay out the alternatives that could be possible on this site that are realistic over the next 10 to 20 years. Because once you use this site, it's gone. There's lots of land in Cary just down the block to build houses, to build office space, and to build additional commercial just towards 40 on, I don't even know what street that is. It's so complicated. I think it's not Walnut, but whatever it is. And there's been a lot of retail built. I mean, Costco's not far away on the other side of town. I count 5 24-hour grocery stores within 10 minutes of my house on Queensferry. So there's plenty of retail, commercial, and office space, and medical space. There's a lot going on around Wake Medical. So I'm not sure why it makes sense to chop up a piece of land that's available uniquely to build ordinary stuff. There's nothing special about what's being proposed. It's just a bunch of, an office building here, a couple of apartments there, maybe some condos here. I don't know what they're planning. But there's nothing special that a special piece of land like that could encourage. And nor did I hear, now, because I haven't been around before, and it's my fault. I haven't paid attention to it. That's my fault, too. But I am going to pay attention. Plenty between now and the end. And at this point, Dr. Cook and I oppose this project. What we want to see is the township staff present alternatives to how the land could be used over the next 20 years. Because there isn't any big piece of land like that available in the heart of the residential community of Cary. There's lots of stuff being built on the periphery. And I don't have some new uses have been put in place. We heard about the elderly center, the swimming center. That's really good stuff. And that really improves the community of Cary. But a bunch more apartments, a bunch more stores.
Mr. Rosenberg, I'm sorry to have to interrupt you.
All right,
Your
well,
time has
I'm
expired.
ready to discuss with the planning staff
Very good.
going forward.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker, please.
Thank you again. I'm David Schaus. I just wanted to say, in general, I support the rezoning as it's proposed. I was also privileged to be included in the Downtown Stormwater Working Group for the last year and a half, and have recently been included in a watershed action team that is actively conducting a review and specific plan for the entire Walnut Creek watershed. This multi-agency effort, led by the state, includes a portion of this site, depending on how the water is piped from rooftops and pavement. I understand the limitations that the town council and the town staff has in influencing some items in both the planning and development process, or rezoning and development process. I would like to encourage the council and the manager to continue the collaborative discussions that are already occurring with the owner's representatives. In particular, when reviewing documents online, I heard just a few minutes ago some of those changes that I was looking to see, and I know that there are plenty of those in the wings. But also, in particular, we know that there are stormwater subject matter experts in our area and our citizens that have local, statewide, national, and even international expertise, and that some of these folks have made presentations to the owner's representatives, the engineering firm. And I would also like to acknowledge that I did hear earlier some of the specific comments from the owner's representative here tonight on pervious and trees and those type of things. In the earlier comments by the Development Services staff to an earlier submittal, they included addressing the social and environmental impacts as being very important in this rezoning and development process. But to complete the triple bottom line, we need to acknowledge that the economic benefits possible with innovative stormwater management practices really can make this project something to be proud of in 20 and 30 and 50 years. The pervious surfaces, green roofs, plant-lined swales that break up massive parking lots and trees. Those are the things that will influence not just the economics, but the livability of a project like this. And so the opportunity to go slow, to go fast, to take our time in looking at this project as you consider it over the coming months and years is very important. And I also would like to point out that it is really incredible that in the span of just a few years, we're looking at a major development and a major redevelopment, the size and scale that are the envy of the East Coast, I would dare to say. I think there are several factors for that. First and foremost is your leadership. Second is the effective administration and the professional staff, and the willingness of this community to speak up, to say, it needs to be something special. As the previous speaker noted, we need to be excited every time we see the next new thing that's presented here. So I thank you for your leadership and the opportunity to address you tonight and to participate in the process as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hi, Mayor and council members. I'm just a citizen. I've been in Cary for 50 years. I've lived in Greenwood Forest for 50 years. Very proud of my town of Cary. I love it, and I want to see the best use of this land.
Could you give us your name, please?
Beg your pardon?
Could you give us your name for the record?
I'm sorry.
You're fine.
Pat Witt. Pat Witt.
Thank you.
W-H-I-T-T.
Thank you.
I'm excited about this project, but we do have to be very careful about what we do with this precious land. There's no more. If you go out Apex Road, 64, is that the way we want to live? Cary has always been unique. It is a unique city. It has been that way, and we want to keep it that way. We don't want to be like North Hills and have monster buildings, I don't think. Maybe you do. I don't. I was appalled at seeing the approval for 3 houses at the corner of Walnut Street and Walker. Jammed together. I don't want to live that way. So I want to see this property. I'm concerned about the schools, Henry Adams and Cary, the traffic patterns there. What are the developers going to do? Are they going to put more roads in to widen the roads so that we can have access to those facilities? And as far as the 12-story building is concerned, we want to be North Hills, huh? We don't want to be a unique Cary. I was excited to hear what these young people had to say about the development. That my concern too is the 1,800 people that you're going to put in a small space again. Do we want to live like that? I don't. So let's work together. There have been a lot of work done, a lot of committees formed to address all these issues, and I hope that we can work together to do that. But the use of the property is crucial. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Witt. Next speaker, please.
I'm Donovan Heinze. I am a resident of Walnut Hills, and I live in walking distance of Cary Town Center. I am, in fact, excited about seeing some redevelopment happening there that I have been witnessing and dying for the past decade or so. I just, one of my major concerns though is due to the fact that this is a major stop on the Route 6, a bus route that I usually take whenever I want to head into downtown or head to downtown Raleigh. I want to know what the plan is for when they are doing the redevelopment, and how is that going to factor in when development is done with this. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Mr. Mayor, Town Council, back again. Len Neiman. I'm not, at this point, I'm not for or against this, but I do have a few observations related to what the last gentleman said. Right now, Cary Town Center is an interchange point for a number of to-go Cary bus routes. Unfortunately, the routes in and out resemble a deranged pretzel. Looking at the diagram here, this dotted blue line between Walnut Street and Maynard, I see a real opportunity here for an efficient route for Go Cary and Go Transit to get through here, excuse me, maintain an interchange point, hopefully with enough space for buses, and possibly even a joint office for Go Transit for senior passes, disabled passes, the smart passes and all that, for people to get them right there. And with all this stuff coming in there, I see improving the bus getting through there as a way to help cut down the number of cars going in and out of there. Okay. And related to the cars, there's an exit there labeled Site Drive 5 going into Walnut that doesn't appear to have a light with it. Right now, there's issues with cars coming out of there and cutting across 5 lanes of traffic to try and get in the left turn lane to get on the Maynard to head down to Kildare Farm Road. With all this office and housing and stuff going in there, I see that increasing drastically. So part of me is wondering why there's no light plan for that exit, because it's going to be a mess. And this is just an observation, but with Fenton going in across the other side of Cary Town Boulevard, I can see a lot of traffic going back and forth between the two, creating a mess on Cary Town Boulevard. So just something to think about is possibly some kind of a shuttle running within and between the two facilities, so people can park in the parking deck and take the shuttle to get back and forth rather than putting a tremendous amount of traffic on Cary Town Boulevard. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hello, Mr. Mayor, Council. My name is Matt Taggart. I live in the Ivy Meadows neighborhood, and my backyard shares a property boundary with this site. I've lived there for about 8 years, and I've had the privilege of coming to speak when Topgolf was proposed and IKEA. I wasn't real optimistic about Topgolf. IKEA was a little better. I think I can speak for a lot of the people in the neighborhood when I say that this is kind of the panacea we've been waiting for this site. It looks like good, responsible development. The applicant is responsive to our concerns. And it just looks really good. So I'm optimistic for it. I have some minor concerns that I just wanted to voice. I like to hear that they're going to maintain the buffer along the property boundary. I'd like to see it maybe evaluated and possibly renovated to compensate for the increase in height, the 6 stories, the residential along there. I know the cedar trees along the top of that buffer are getting old and starting to decline. I didn't see anything about it in the tree report. Maybe the arborist could have a look at those, and potentially they could replant. Traffic is going to be a really big concern. I don't know what you do. It looks like stacking might be an issue on the northern part of the site as you enter. I know the applicant probably doesn't want to put a traffic circle in because they take up so much real estate, but it might facilitate movement. There's no sidewalk on the northern part of the property right now along Cary Town Boulevard. There should be, probably. I'd like to see one put in, maybe. You've heard some comments during the public speaks out portion about concern for the tree canopy in Cary Town-wide. I think the applicant should probably overemphasize tree planting on this site in terms of cooling, aesthetics, stormwater retention, and it really seems to be a theme that people want. Speaking of stormwater, it is a really big problem at this site. I know it's going to improve with the redevelopment just because the impervious surface will be reduced. But I walk along Walnut Creek, and I can tell you it's gotten worse just in 8 years, probably from surrounding development. You see really bad erosion. So if they could put in maybe innovative stormwater retention and detention, NC State Campus is a really good place to look for this. This site definitely needs it. I've probably taken up more time than I should. Thank you for listening.
You've got plenty more. Keep going.
That's it. I'll send you an email.
Thank you. Anyone else to speak at this public hearing? Anyone at all? Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing. And before I open it up to my colleagues, this is very good feedback. We need to continue to communicate even after tonight. Send us emails. Call us. Do anything you can to provide us the information we need. There were several things mentioned. I know I took a lot of notes. I know Ms. Robinson tore a page off, so she's on page 2 of taking notes. And I know a lot of us have a lot to say. But I would like to make my comments first since I control the gavel. So I'm going to go for it. I heard comments about a plan. Cary does have a plan for this site. It was mentioned earlier, and it's called the Cary Community Plan. That was created over 3 years by Cary citizens. We didn't create it. And then the plan was reduced to decision points by 30 citizens, and then it was presented to us for the yes and no on certain items in that plan. So we have a Cary Community Plan created by the Cary citizens, and staff makes sure that this proposal will follow the items in the Cary Community Plan. If you haven't looked at it, it's online, and it covers everything you can think of, from the environment, from bicycles to pedestrian to traffic to anything you can think of is in the Cary Community Plan. It's comprehensive. I also heard comments about asking the applicant to do certain things, and somebody realized that we do have limitations, and we do have very strict limitations. So what we do with the applicant is say, I really like 75%, I really hate 25%, and here's what I don't like. And that encourages them to provide conditions, because if they don't provide conditions, then we can't enforce it, and it usually doesn't happen. I'm really curious about the environmental impact study. We have environmental guidelines that they have to go by, but I don't know if we can require an environmental impact study. So I'm going to ask staff to reply to that in a minute. And the traffic impact, of course, is going to be very big, and they're required to do that. And they'll have all kinds of information and detailed information about the traffic study and how all the intersections, the egress, and will be impacting this site and sites around them. They've already committed to doing some improvements. We'll see what that does with those improvements. So that's something we're definitely going to look at. I also heard about transit, and Ms. Robinson can probably jump in on this. My understanding is we're probably going to see a BRT, bus rapid transit, probably come by this site, inside this site, and the Fenton So that's going to be in addition to our bus expansion that we expect to see. Is that what you're hearing, Ms.
Yes,
Robert?
that's my understanding, but I don't think it's conclusive yet.
Right. And then I heard a comment which council's talked about a lot. Between the Fenton and the mall, there's going to be all this traffic. What can we do? We talked about building bridges. How much would that cost? Pedestrian bridges, how much would that cost? So that's all still up in the air. And yes, that's a big concern we have also, because you're exactly right. Traffic will be going back and forth between these two huge developments. And if you don't know, Fenton is 90 acres and this site's 87 acres. So they're both huge. Fenton is the largest development in Cary history, 90 acres, so this has got to be the second largest. So these are two big projects. They're happening pretty much at the same time. And so, yes, they require a lot of attention, and I promise you, we will do due diligence. And so those are the things I had on my list. I know my colleagues have a lot more than I do, and I'm going to turn it over to you, Ms. Robinson, because I think you have more notes than anybody.
Well, no, I will just say this, because I know we're going to have a work session. I appreciated the comments that every single person contributed and the insights that you all have. It's very helpful for us as we go into a work session to be able to understand what's important to our citizens and the direction that we should be going, things that we should be talking about. So I really appreciate you coming and talking. Please continue, as the mayor said, please send us emails because it really helps us a lot. The ideas that we got today, we're all taking notes here. So we will be discussing all of these in our work session, and we hope to make you proud. I mean, we're really just here as representatives for you.
Other comments? I'll look this way. Ms. Frank.
I'll just add, since a lot of what needs to be said has already been said, I guess my only disappointment on this is that we haven't gotten the design guidebook yet, because I think that could have addressed a lot of, or at least some of the comments that we heard tonight. We went through a very similar process with the Fenton project, and once we saw that guidebook that our staff and the applicant spent a lot of time on, a lot of things became clearer in how special a project this or that project could be. I'm very excited about the opportunities that we have here regarding stormwater. I mean, we are taking pretty much a 100% impervious site and adding green space and 1,000 trees. I mean, that was cool. I mean, can we do better? Absolutely. And I think we'll make some changes as this goes through the process. I appreciate the traffic concern, but the applicant is comparing their traffic to a 100% fully functional mall, which we probably haven't had for 25 years. So what has to be done, we're going to work on this, A lot has changed in that 25 years around this site. There's been additional traffic created from other uses. And while the mall is not a full heavy traffic generator, and hasn't been for quite some time, I think we can still continue to make improvements and do better. I'm excited about the options with transit. I'm thrilled with the berm and the buffer between Ivy Lane and this site. Maybe we can do better there. I mean, there's a lot of work to do on this thing, so I would echo the comments for everybody to stay involved, be a part of the process, and we'll get there.
Other comments? Mr. George.
Yeah, let me comment. I appreciate what Ms. Witt had to say. I think one of the things that makes Cary such a great place, special place, is that we have choices. There are places I wouldn't choose to live, but somebody else would, and somebody might choose an 800 square foot apartment, and somebody might want a 2,000 square foot 2-story house. And I think this provides those choices to where we're not a one-size-fits-all community, and we've been going that direction for some time. So I think that's a positive thing, that we're providing choices, even though I wouldn't choose some of the alternatives. And then I'll just add a quick little thing. My wife said, let's please keep the little train to run the grandkids around the mall. She said, I'm going to miss the train. So if you can find a way to put a train around the little mall to get the kids on.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, my wife would, with all the grandkids. But no, that's it.
Mr. Smith?
Well, it's in my district, so I can just tell the folks that live out that way, the Pirates Cove people, the Ivy Lane people, Greenwood Circle people, all the folks over there on Walnut Street, that you can be rest assured that along with my peers, we're watching this one closely. You know, the comment that kind of struck me earlier was when the person said this is like a special land use and it has to be something special. And there is a challenge at meetings like this when all you can look at are the boxes. So as Mr. Franz said, when we get all of the design guidelines and all of that, you know, I think we're going to see a real opportunity here for some of that special stuff to kind of come out. And the other thing is, you know, there was a concern about Walnut Street that'll always be there, and with the mall dying, the traffic maybe hasn't been quite what it was before. But with Fenton and this, a lot of the way the design is to take advantage of I-40 and so forth. And so, you know, you can't say that it won't get more problematic with traffic, but I do think that the way both organizations, both groups are working with the town, a lot of effort is going to be put into that area. And we're investing millions. You know, I don't want to say the wrong number, but we were talking about, I think, 30+ million. So we're going to be also contributing. We're going to have a high standard for both Fenton and this one, but at the same time, we as a town are going to be stepping up also to make sure that we invest in this wisely so that it still becomes a safe and welcoming place in Cary. You know, I will say quite selfishly, I want that berm. I helped create that first one. I'm quite proud of that. And I never thought back in the 1990 and 91 when I said, yeah, and put trees on top. I never thought they would do it. So I was still kind of happy that we got all those Leland cypress on top. So I think it's a perfect buffer. I think it can't just look like it looks today. It has deteriorated over time. It looks kind of like a worn out old shoe. And there's an opportunity there for a visual enhancement for both the mall itself and what those apartments are going to be looking at, and also providing that barrier and a nice view for Ivy Lane. And it was interesting to see some of the persons step up from Ivy Lane, kind of the new generation. And I'd like to tell the story of the first time when we were debating for that berm. Nobody had unsweet tea. They didn't know that Yankees were moving into the area, so they didn't have any. So they offered me pink lemonade. So I did have pink lemonade on Ivy Lane as we negotiated for that original mall. And it's kind of neat to be around to see this redevelopment. But, you know, I think with what's going on both sides, one of the things that all of the citizens in the community can take pride in is that we are setting a high bar, and that remarkable is at the top of that. And you know, I'm sure I'm speaking for all of us when I say we're gonna really hold to a high standard. This is not one where you know, we're gonna just be satisfied with, like, you know, a C- project because it's better than what's there. I won't repeat all the stuff about the environment and all the other issues they've been said, but you know, rest assured, I think you're going to be seeing state-of-the-art design guidelines to protect our environment, to protect our trees, and all the other things that go with it. So, as the mayor said and the rest said, keep the feedback coming, and I'll share your frustration at looking at little boxes on a map. But understand those little boxes, there's going to be a lot of effort to make those little boxes into something special so that we can all be proud of what's going there.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. How about down this end, Mr. Yaha?
Sure. I came prepared with a list of questions and comments and added a few to my list based on the wonderful comments made by the public tonight. I think most of them are best handled in the work session coming up, and I promise to get a lot of those questions to the staff ahead of time so they're prepared to handle them at the work session. But I guess to make one comment, it was based on Mr. Rosenberg's use of the word special. I'd like to see something special there. I've been saying that for years. I'd like to see something special there at the mall. And one thing that's been under discussion was the inclusion of a significant community recreation center, community center, conference center, whatever you want to call it. And I know it's not the applicant doesn't have this under their control to do this. I perfectly understand that. The town doesn't even have this under their control to perfectly include this. A lot of ducks need to get in a row before such a thing happens. But I was hoping to see on the preliminary development plan some mention of that, so at least a note of some sort that blocks number such and such, such and such, and such might be usable for such a facility. I've talked with the applicant and they seem to be in favor of doing that themselves, but I didn't notice any note as such on the preliminary development plan. So I would like to see something like that, because I think there is an opportunity to do something special with this piece of land. For the rest of my comments, I think I'll get answered at the work session.
Okay, very good.
Cleanup, huh? Did you already speak?
Everybody
spoke. So I echo the comments with regards to something special, but I think there's something unique as well about this applicant, about the representative for the applicant, is that they have some great advice, and they have something going on across the street that took us quite a bit of time to approve. So they have some idea of what this council expects, what's in our DNA, and what we like to see on the ground. I think it could be a gem. I'm very encouraged about the environmental opportunities to make a difference. I think the citizen who came and said, hey, it'd be great to have green roofs and those types of things, I say, great. I'd love to see it be a LEED certified set of buildings. I think what we have is a great opportunity to make it a gem in the community, and I'm happy that this applicant is interested, willing, and has done this kind of thing before. That's often a good way to see, hey, I've done this sort of thing, and I'm excited about that. One other thing that I'd love to see is citizens stay engaged. We have this public hearing, but this isn't your only opportunity. Watch it as it goes through the process. We'll have a work session. Tell us what you think. You make a difference. You created the community plan. We're just your representative. So let us know what you think about these plans as they move forward.
Very good. Before I send this on to the Planning and Zoning Board, there was the question about an environmental impact study. Mr. Berry, you want to comment on that?
Yeah, so why don't we talk with staff, allow us to talk with staff and the applicant, and we can bring something back at the work session to talk about sort of combining a lot of those issues together, if that's okay.
Very good.
Great.
So where we are in the process now is this will now go, in the official process, go to the Planning and Zoning Board for their review and recommendation. My guess is at the work session, which will come in between, is the applicant has heard tonight from the residents, and they will hear from us, and there will be additional changes. Our hope is what goes to the Planning and Zoning Board for their review and recommendation is pretty close to what's going to be proposed in the end that we will vote on, so we can get a true evaluation from our citizens on the Planning and Zoning Board. So that's where we are. As was mentioned, please contact us. You can come speak at any meeting. Just like I said at the beginning of this one, as long as it's not a public hearing, you can talk about anything you want. So that means you can come to every meeting we have until we vote on it. And you can come the night we vote on it and speak. So you have that opportunity if you don't want to send emails. So I want to thank everybody for coming here, and don't let this be your last time at Cary Town Council meetings. And with that, I will send this on to the Planning and Zoning Board, and I thank our staff and the applicants for being here and the residents for being here that spoke. And with that, we'll move on to our second public hearing. Our next public hearing is 19 REZ 13, White Oak Church Resource Building rezoning. And I'll recognize Assistant Planning Director Deborah Grannon, who's going to introduce this item. And once again, council will not take action on this item tonight. Instead, it will go to the Planning and Zoning Board. Ms. Grant.
Thank you. For your consideration is a relatively simple rezoning request. This is for property located at 1621 White Oak Church Road on 1.76 acres. Subject property is highlighted here. It's across the street from the White Oak Baptist Church and adjacent to White Oak Elementary School. The subject property is zoned office and institutional conditional use. And the applicant has asked to amend that zoning to include a new use, and that's office use. So currently, they're limited to assembly, religious assembly, and office. They've discovered that they would like to add a medical office component to this existing building, and they've proposed a zoning condition that that would not exceed 5,000 square feet, which is just a portion of this building. In our preliminary analysis, staff finds that this would address policies in the work and shape chapters and provide appropriate transitions between uses. And on that subject, we're noting the location of the school, again, adjacent to the property and across the street from an existing church, and also pointing out that this is adjacent to a recently approved preliminary development plan that would allow a mixture of both office and institutional, townhomes, and residential multifamily uses. Property owners within 800 feet of the subject property were notified by mail, which exceeds the state requirement of notifying adjacent property owners. At the neighborhood meeting on July 10th, there were 2 nearby property owners in attendance, and their questions and concerns were regarding traffic and development activity in the vicinity. And since then, we have received 1 email from a resident who has asked that this entire area stay low-density residential, as was envisioned on the previous plan. And this concludes staff's presentation. Following the applicant's comments and the public hearing, I'll be available for your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Granite. At this time, I would invite the applicant forward for their remarks.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Glenda Top with Glenda S. Top and Associates. I'm here tonight on behalf of the applicant, the White Oak Foundation, and the only thing that I will add is the foundation is very excited to finally have the resource building complete. At the time the property was originally rezoned, they did not really know what the ultimate use might be for the property, and currently they are offering limited medical and dental services to members of the church, and by being able to use this building, it will allow them to do it in a more professional manner and meet the intent of their mission. I'm here to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Top. Now it's time for public hearing 19 REZ 13 White Oak Church Resource Building rezoning, and I would invite our first speaker forward. Anyone to speak at this public hearing? Seeing no one, we'll close the public hearing and open it up to my colleagues for their remarks and questions. Personally, I like office, so when you say you want to move something to office, I go, okay. I don't have a problem with it, but I don't know what other council members are thinking. Any other comments before we?
I think we're thinking the same thing you are.
Yep, okay.
It's already in office, just add medical.
Right, exactly. Okay, so this will go to the Planning and Zoning Board for their review and recommendation, and we'll probably see it back in a couple of months or so.
Or
2,
one.
3, 1. Okay, very good.
It's a quickie.
That's right.
All right, we'll move to our third public hearing, 19 RZ 09, which is at 9916 Marsville Parkway, and it's a rezoning there. And once again, Ms. Grannon will introduce this item, and we will not take action on this item. Instead, it will go to the Planning and Zoning Board.
Thank you. This next request would apply initial Town of Cary zoning to 2.53 acres at 9916 Morrisville Parkway. There is an associated annexation petition with this request, and action on that will not occur until the rezoning case comes back to you for final determination. The north side of Morrisville Parkway at its intersection with Fersen Road. According to Cary's GIS maps, a stream buffer impacts a small area on the northwestern corner of the site, and no wetlands or floodplains appear to be present on the subject property. The property is zoned Wake County R40 watershed, and the applicant has proposed a zoning district of residential 12 conditional use. Conditions proposed by the applicant would limit the use to detached residential, and there would be a maximum of 3 dwelling units. There would be no direct access to Morrisville Parkway, and the applicant has proposed to dedicate right-of-way along Morrisville Parkway and at the intersection of Morrisville Parkway and Fersen Road. This slide depicts the location of where that 30 feet of right-of-way along Morrisville Parkway would be located, and that larger area at the corner. Fersen Road is a local street, so this area at the intersection would not have required dedication even if the property had been subject to a full development plan. So by offering this zoning condition, the dedication would help future alignment of Fersen Road and Green Hope School Road on the opposite side of the street. The dedication does not exempt the applicant from subdivision review because it does exempt the applicant because it decreases the site to just under 2 acres. So this means that the applicant would not have to meet typical subdivision requirements, including construction of roadway improvements and placement of a streetscape. Regarding the future growth framework and special planning area map, the site is located in the green level special planning area in neighborhoods west of Flat Branch. And this proposed rezoning provides an appropriate use and transitions in this vicinity. There is a future street side trail proposed along the property frontage along Morrisville Parkway, which would connect to the existing trail at Copperleaf and Green Hope School Road. As an exempt subdivision, the project would not be responsible for construction of the trail. The property fronts Morrisville Parkway, a 2-lane thoroughfare shown on the planned roadway widths map as a future 4-lane median divided road. And some of the right-of-way would be dedicated with the rezoning, but again, the improvements would not be required of the applicant. Property owners within 800 feet of the site were notified regarding the public hearing, which exceeds the state requirement of notifying adjacent property owners. There was a neighborhood meeting here at Town Hall on June 5th, and there were no attendees other than the applicant. Since that time, we've had one email from a nearby property owner who was seeking additional information about the request. So this concludes staff's presentation. The applicant is here, and following their comments, and the public hearing will be available for your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Grant. At this time, I would invite the applicant forward for their remarks.
Thank you. My name is Vince DeFreitas. I'm the applicant, and Deborah did an excellent job summarizing the proposed application. I don't have anything additional to add other than there are similar neighborhoods both north and south of the location. And I hope you'll consider my application, and I'm here to answer any questions as needed.
Thank you. Now it's time for the public hearing for 19 REZ09 at 9916 Marsville Parkway, and I would invite our first speaker forward. Anyone to speak at this public hearing? Seeing no one, we'll close the public hearing, open it up, council, for question or comments?
No comment.
Nope. Okay, it's going to our Planning and Zoning Board for their review and recommendation, and we will see it in the future. We now move to our fourth public hearing, 19 REZ02 Alston Avenue PDP, and once again, Assistant Planning Director Deborah Grannon will introduce the item, and we will not take action on the rezoning, and it will be referred to the Planning and Zoning Board. Ms. Grannon.
Hello again. This is a request to rezone approximately 18.9 acres located along Alston Avenue near its intersection with O'Kelly Chapel Road. Subject property is highlighted here in yellow. And it is part of one of the Alston neighborhoods, the Evans Farm neighborhood, which was designated as part of the Alston Area Activity Center Concept Plan as a location for both townhomes, single-family homes, and multifamily. However, because of the complexity of that Alston plan, the different neighborhoods, the transportation zones, the design zones, several of those neighborhoods did not allow the multifamily component. Since the plan was adopted, we've also adopted the Imagine Cary Community Plan and designated this area as a destination center. So this is an area where we're looking for higher densities. Therefore, the applicant is responding to the Cary Community Plan and asking to rezone from the base zoning district of Residential 40 to MXD, Mixed Use District. What they're proposing is 330 multifamily units, 41 townhomes, 15,300 square feet of community gathering space. They've also offered public roads in the townhome portion of the property. And with a mixed-use development, the applicant can propose their own modifications or development standards. Some of the modifications include a request for a 30% parking reduction within the multifamily portion of the site, removal of one champion tree. I would like to point out that no parking reduction has been proposed within the townhome portion of the property. And this shows you the location, the red circle of where the champion tree is located. According to Cary's Parks, Recreation and Cultural Resources Facilities Master Plan, there is a proposed greenway trail adjacent to and running through the site, and the applicant has proposed construction of the trail for the portion that is on their property. The site is impacted by stream buffers, as shown on Cary's most recent GIS maps. The applicant has identified these on the preliminary development plan, and field determination will be finalized at the time of development plan review. Alston Avenue is a local road. Therefore, a 15-foot streetscape is proposed, but the applicant is proposing a 30-foot streetscape. A traffic study was required, and the circles in green highlight the locations where intersections were studied. The traffic study identified several recommended improvements at the study intersection shown in green. At this time, the applicant has only offered to complete a partial improvement at the intersection of O'Kelly Road and Alston Avenue. There's more details provided in the staff report, and the applicant would like to speak to you on that subject this evening. In staff's preliminary analysis of the request, we find that the live, shape, shop, and work chapters are all applicable to this request. We'd also like to point out that along with the preliminary development plan, the applicant is also proposing to continue to meet the design standards of the Alston Activity Center concept plan. So enhanced streetscapes, the way the buildings are placed, entry features, the use of brick for entry monuments, things that give that Alston area its feel and that high quality look are still going to be proposed as part of this development. This helps them, though, achieve the higher density that the plan does not allow today. And this helps you see how the proposed development fits with some other recently approved cases and development projects that are in review. So the Hawthorne at Parkside multifamily project is north of where the multifamily development is proposed with this proposal. The Alston Ridge townhomes currently under review are adjacent to the townhome portion of the proposed preliminary development plan. So in our first observation, staff has seen that this does work cohesively with the other development in the area. Property owners within 800 feet of the subject property were notified. There was a neighborhood meeting here at Town Hall on March 6th, and no issues were raised other than interest in development from adjacent property owners. And we've not received any emails or phone calls. Once again, following the public hearing and the applicant's comments, I'll be available for your questions.
This time I'd like to invite our applicant forward for their remarks.
Mayor, members of council, Glenda Topp with Glenda S. Topp and Associates here tonight on behalf of the applicant. Staff has done an excellent job. We worked well with staff in coming up with a vehicle to rezone the property. Up until now, staff had been doing their own, or the town had been doing their own rezonings within the Alston plan. Since many of the assumptions with the Alston plan were not met, such as the plan showing that Alston Avenue would be no longer, it made sense to come up with another way to look at these areas, and what we came up with was the MXD zoning with the PDD, and as staff said, it does give more specificity and the ability to understand completely what is being proposed. In terms of the transportation items, the applicant is working with the two adjacent property owners with their development and are very close to coming to an agreement to install that traffic light at the intersection of Alston and O'Kelly Chapel. Just not there yet, and as staff pointed out, just wanted to update staff on that and would be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Topp. Now's time for public hearing 19 REZ02 Alston Avenue PDP, and I would invite our first speaker forward. Anyone to speak at this public hearing? Seeing no one, we'll close the public hearing, open it up to council members for questions or comments.
I'll make a
Ms.
couple
Robinson.
comments. Sometimes we have a project like this where nobody comes out and speaks because nobody lives really close to it. And then after the fact, people come and go, now that I see it's built, I wish you guys had thought of this or that kind of thing. So, just looking at it and having a little bit of time to absorb everything, I think that given that, yes, you're giving 15,000 square feet for community gathering space, still, when you think about that, that's not like a tremendous amount of space. It's a little bit of space, but there's a lot of people here for that 15,000 square feet of community space. With that being said, I really think that you guys need to pay particular attention to that stormwater control device or measure up there at the top of the parcel, because I think it's going to make a big difference whether it's one of these kind of forgotten sort of swampy looking areas, or if it's going to be something that the community can feel proud of and maybe somehow, walk around or something, you feel like it's a feature for their community. So I think that's important, and I think we as a town need to be considerate about that exit ramp, entrance ramp for 540 right there. It looks like the neighboring community has units and maybe a circulator road right up against that. Anyway, it's something for us to consider. It's probably a nice healthy buffer, since there was a creek right there, would have been preferred for that exit ramp, so that when people are coming off, they're not looking at the backyards of houses or whatever, thinking about our gateways. Anyway, just a couple thoughts that I think somebody will bring up to me if we don't bring it up here.
Yep. Other comments or questions?
The only other thing that I noticed is that if once you add these almost 400 units to the large number of units we have, that takes this whole area to about 600 units, if not more. So it just begs the question of how are people going to cross Highway 55, right? And we do have on the bond referendum looking at a safe pedestrian crossing across 55, because you've got all these people in one location, and they can look across the street at the grocery store and the mall and everything going over across the street. So I just think that we need to be judicious, because otherwise there is no safe way to cross 55.
Yeah, good point.
Okay, good points. Any other comments? All right, this will go to our Planning and Zoning Board for their review and recommendation, and we will see this again in the future. Our next public hearing is Act 12 Land Development Ordinance Amendments, and Senior Planning Director Mary Bierman will introduce this item. Council will not take action tonight. Instead, we're going to refer it to our Planning and Zoning Board. Ms. Bierman.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is a public hearing for Act 12 amendments to the Town Code and Land Development Ordinance. There are 3 items in Act 12. Item A includes process-related changes that are required by recent legislation, and items B and C include some technical cleanup of the Town Code and the LDO, as well as some other minor amendments. This first item includes changes that are needed for consistency with Part 1 of Senate Bill 355. This went into effect on July 12th of this year, so we're amending the ordinance to be consistent with that, and there are 2 changes. The first would allow a 6-month period of inactivity and plan review before an applicant could be required to resubmit and start over the review process. And currently, our ordinance has a 90-day time limit for that. And the second change would be to prohibit the downzoning of property by a third party, such as a neighbor. Items B and C would align department names and titles in the Town Code and the LDO with the town's current organizational structure. It would remove an outdated section of the Town Code and then make several other minor and technical changes that are described in your staff report. And this concludes staff's presentation, and following the public hearing will be available for questions.
Very good. Now's the time for the public hearing for Act 12 Land Development Ordinance Amendments, and I would invite our first speaker forward. Anyone to speak at this public hearing? Seeing no one, we'll close this public hearing. And at this time, I would like to call back Ms. Granum.
Excuse me. On her face.
As you may know, this is the last time that Mrs. Bierman is going to be making a presentation to you. And she's often been in the spotlight in front of you for hundreds of rezoning cases. and hundreds of ordinance amendments. And then behind the scenes, which you don't see, are the thousands of zoning permits that she's been dealing with over the past 12 years. And we just want you to know how valuable she is to all of us in the planning department and to the entire town. We'd also like you to know that if there's any unforeseen repercussions from these ordinance amendments, that Mary will not be framed or be held responsible for this. We're going to think of her fondly. We're going to remember her and wish her well. And we want her to know that she's always going to be a star as far as we're concerned. So we would just like to say thank you and let you know how much we've appreciated her over the years. We're going to miss her.
Gosh, I wasn't expecting that.
That was a priceless look.
Look, why is Deborah coming up here?
Okay. Let me just say thank you so much. It's, as you all know by now, I grew up in Cary back many years ago when the population was really small. Seen a lot of changes, and to end my career here is very special. So I really treasure these last 11 years that I've been here. It's been a pleasure to work with all the folks on staff, the planning department, all the other departments, such a great team of people that are so dedicated to the town, and I've had just thoroughly enjoyed that. We'll miss everyone. Thank you so much for what you have done to make Cary such a great place, and just the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of decisions that have been made that collectively have made our community what it is, and thank you as a resident of all these years for that. And of course, thank you, Sean, for the leadership and opportunities over the last several years. I'm so fortunate to have been here at a time when I could, see some of these changes that have come about. So it's been a great experience, and I just can't thank you enough for the opportunities. Thank you.
So we're really going to miss you, and I just can't believe somebody so young is retiring. I'm like, I'm in the wrong career. I still got 5 more years before I retire. But thank you so much for all you've done, and you've been a blessing to work with. We've really enjoyed working with you. And having said that, unless there's a comment about this proposal, it's going to go to the Planning and Zoning Board for their review and recommendation. And enjoy your retirement. We'll miss you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. We now move to discussion items, and our first discussion item is ground leases and utilization agreement for the Cary Regional Library and parking deck. Director of Economic Development Ted Boyd will present this item, and council may take action.
Good evening, council. It's exciting to see the library and the parking deck coming to completion. And one of the final things for your consideration is a ground lease and presenting the information about the operation, the use, and the maintenance of that going forward. It's always good to be reminded of where this started with sometimes ideas and just renderings, and then to be able to see it really coming to life and what it will, just all of the great things that it's going to be bringing to our downtown and our continued revitalization efforts. As just a reminder, the town and Wake County entered into a memorandum of understanding that guided our design phase, and then we went into an interlocal agreement, which was for our construction phase, and now we're in the ground lease, which will get us to the finish line, the project completion and operation, and then open to the public. All of the key terms for this are highlighted in your staff report. One thing that I will note is that I will say that our attorneys, team, and staff, we have been working on this today, and so there was an update to those that was made, and just those reflections and changes are there, and I will share a little bit about those. But just to highlight a few of the key terms, you can see sort of the highlighted portion where the library is, and so the ground lease is covering that smaller highlighted area with the library, the area just to the south, that little small piece, the front, and the bridge. The term is 40 years plus a 5-year extension at no cost. and the use of the leases for a Wake County Regional Library. Also covered in this are the parking spaces within the deck. There would be 60 marked spaces for the library, specific use during library hours, and the availability of an additional 60 spaces for public use also during those, but they wouldn't be marked to begin with. The county will lease to the town 3,300 square feet on the ground level at no cost. The restrooms and unfinished shell are a part of that, those pieces. The county will pay a proportional share of the initial cost for the security system in the deck. One note to that initial cost did include several years of operational cost to that, so that was captured within those. But one of the changes that was highlighted was that we will have ongoing negotiations with the county regarding the future security system replacement because we realize technology changes and we want to be looking at that. The operating and maintenance costs for this, there was a change in the staff report for the parking deck, and it'll be approximately $70,000, which will be absorbed in the FY 2020 operating budget. One of the reasons for that change, initially, when we were looking at the security changes, we were looking at not just simply the parking deck, but the arts center and the theater itself. And so that initial number actually reflected more than just the parking deck. So that change reflects the proportionate share, just looking at the deck here, just as a note with that. In the next steps, the Wake County Board of Commissioners is scheduled to meet and vote on the ground lease on August the 19th. And then after the ground lease is approved by both parties, the county will continue to complete the construction of the library and the parking deck. And then our staff team will be working with the county for their future opening dates and dedication, which will happen the fall of this year. You can see the recommendation here. I won't read all of those pieces, but just highlight that there are still, as was indicated in the draft lease, a few minor or non-substantive items that we will continue to negotiate, and a part of that recommendation is authorizing both the town manager and town attorney to continue those non-substantive sort of negotiations to complete this. And without that, I'll stop and say if you have any further questions, we'll be happy to try to answer those for you.
Thank you, Mr. Boyd. So I'll open it up to my colleagues for questions, comments, or if you feel that we're ready for a motion, we can have that too.
Just a quick question. How will the developer that will be developing around the deck, what part will they be participating in?
So all of that we're contemplating. We'll have a development agreement, separate development agreement related to that, and the specific elements related to the parking spaces as it relates to the development. So there will be those ongoing negotiations of what the proportionate share they would pay for all of these sort of ongoing operational costs and upfit costs as well. And we'll getting close to having that draft, so we'll be able to bring that before council soon.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
Make a motion to approve staff recommendation.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Discussion.
I just want to thank you all for your great work and the county for their partnership. I mean, this has been a total team effort between a number of different agencies and departments. It's just exciting to see this thing being close to opening up.
And we have a ribbon cutting on the calendar as of today, and I can't remember the date.
November the 3rd.
November the 3rd.
2 p.m.
Help celebrate with us. We'll be cutting that ribbon. All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Boyd.
Thank you.
We now move to our second discussion item, the Environmental Advisory Board tree recommendation update. And it says Town Manager Stiegel, but that's not true. We'll recognize Assistant Town Manager Dan Alt for this report.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. It's my privilege tonight to bring forward the Environmental Advisory Board's tree recommendations and provide kind of an update in the context around those. So the purpose for the item tonight is to recognize the work of the Environmental Advisory Board, review those recommendations and some of the context surrounding them, and to receive some policy guidance from you all in terms of how we can carry those forward, perhaps. So first and foremost, recognizing the Environmental Advisory Board. I know that there's quite a few members, I believe, still here tonight. Here's the entire board here captured in this picture, and their good work. And specifically with this item, wanted to make sure I highlighted the EAB's Tree Advisory Subcommittee, who really took kind of the work on and worked on this for several months. And of course, Emily Barrett, the staff liaison, and Councilmember Jack Smith, the council liaison, who helped shepherd this through the process. And before we go forward and look at the specific recommendations, I really thought it was important to look at how we build on success and stewardship of the past. As we heard from many speakers tonight, the community for years has had a passion about trees. This council and previous councils' actions have really allowed us to have trees still be part of our community as we've experienced exponential growth really over the last 50 years, which I think is a remarkable thing. So looking at some of the tools and tactics that have led to that success, and then really kind of now looking towards the future in terms of how we can continue to build on that. So one of the major things is parkland, obviously, as Cary's developed, setting aside parkland, developing parkland for people to really experience a higher quality of life. And it brings all kinds of different facilities, as you can see just in the picture here, but also protects trees. Open space, so dedicated land just for environmental benefits, facilities such as Hemlock Bluffs and others, where we have land that's just set aside just for future generations to enjoy and current residents to enjoy as is. Stream buffers, which we've talked about quite a bit through the development process and has really had a big impact on water quality, stormwater issues and flooding, but also, protects these corridors for wildlife and certainly for trees, and it prevents other things such as erosion, et cetera. Tree preservation ordinances and practices that we have through our development processes, reviewing, championing trees and protections during grading, et cetera, really makes a big difference and shows kind of the dedication through the years and the dedication of this council to making sure that while we're facilitating development, we're able to preserve trees and to kind of maintain a special place for trees as we have development, such here as we see here in the picture. Extensive screenings and perimeter plantings, as we heard Councilmember Smith talk about the berm that he helped facilitate and oftentimes comes up as barriers between development. That adds up and makes a difference when you think of it on a community-wide basis. And so having that practice since, as he alluded to, in the 90s, really does make a difference and makes a difference going forward. Some quick facts, and there's a lot more that could be highlighted here, but I just wanted to give a flavor of what I just talked about, that really the having the stream buffers and all the other tools and tactics I mentioned leads to a significant amount of acreage being protected for things such as trees. When you consider, especially in those buffers, it may even be in private land, but you look at what 10,000 acres or 20% of our total land base really is significant. 3,000 acres of developed parkland, over 80 miles of greenway, and then things such as, handing out seedlings at spring days and other events does have an impact when you add that up over years and years, and you think about 20,000. So many more, and some of which are highlighted in the staff report, and there's lots of things that really have been impactful over the years. Now tying it going forward to the community plan, just like so many other issues that we've discussed here, as the community has changed and as it matures, and the items I think tonight really highlighted that as we change to a maturing where redevelopment, it becomes more common, infill development becomes more common. Those tools and tactics need to change as well. Whereas we had greenfield development, you can see a lot of our tools and tactics were about setting aside tracts of land. So now as we go into more redevelopment opportunities, it's a lot of the comments that we've heard tonight, but how do we create even more tools or tactics and carrots and sticks that enable kind of the ultimate goals and objectives we have going forward. Also, as the community ages, some other kind of comments that have come up, the trees age too. And so as the community ages, there's increased liability, there's trees that age, reach kind of a mature age. And then there's also on private lands probably a need to encourage replanting or kind of a greater awareness. So there's a difference that we can make in both public and private lands, but once the land has been developed, it's incumbent upon encouraging individuals in particular to help us meet whatever our objectives are with urban forestry. So just wanted to give some additional ongoing staff work and some of that context. that is related to trees specifically, the item, and also other items. So we've heard a lot about stormwater. Mr. Schaus was talking about the downtown stormwater group. So applying the stormwater model to trees is something that is ongoing work and critically important. It comes up time and time again. And so really understanding that nexus is important to create an optimized situation. Working with NC State geospatial analytics to gather more baseline data on our canopy, and also to kind of have a greater understanding on where we can maybe go in terms of best practices. Again, something else we've heard tonight. One example is collaboration with the City of Raleigh. There's other organizations we've also been collaborating with that are in similar situations, and really kind of understanding what are the best tools and practices. They have some more experience in the redevelopment area and some of these types of issues that we're starting to experience as well. Then the last piece that I'm very excited about is citizen science. So as we go forward, creating opportunities where there's alignment and individual stakeholder rewards and kind of incentives for certain behaviors. So really kind of bringing people together around a common goal and allowing people to opt in if they so choose to make a difference. And I think in Cary that makes a lot of sense. We've heard that from citizens speaking out, numerous times tonight, and hear that regularly, that there's a strong interest. We hear it on the EAB, a strong interest to really participate directly in helping meet community objectives. So that's something we're definitely thinking about. On to the recommendations themselves. These are kind of summarized to really boil down what the EAB recommendations are here. You see kind of a recommendation for a goal to increase the urban tree canopy, update the community appearance manual to recommend native and local trees, developing an urban forest master plan with short and long-term performance goals and objectives. And I have to go on to his second page here. Hire an urban forester with adequate resources to develop and implement the urban forest master plan. Earlier we heard a mention of arborists. We do have an arborist on staff and have had an arborist on staff since 2013, and have several individuals that have that expertise but do not have an urban forester, as was alluded to. Some amendments to the LDO, also just like other areas of Imagine Cary, to support the urban forest master plan. And then create kind of a vehicle to reassess the canopy on an ongoing basis to really understand areas that maybe have extra significance, and also to just kind of understand how we're doing from an aesthetic and overall performance basis. And so with that, shows a picture here from top of a water tower, because really getting back then to the bigger picture, just to gain some additional feedback and perhaps maybe some policy guidance from the council as we continue to work through these and kind of piece together the information that we've been working on, and now that we've had a chance to hear from some citizens and also have the EAB recommendations in front of us. If there's any additional feedback, now would be the time for us to gather that and additional recommendations.
Thank you, Mr. Alt. I know that the goal is to give feedback, so I thought we'd start with our Council Liaison, Jack Smith, first, before you hear from the rest of us.
Yeah, well, first of all, I want to thank, the staff for getting back to us in this timely manner. There's a couple things that you probably saw as we were quickly going through, and one was the goal of hiring a forester. Mr. Stigl, I want to put you on the spot, but where do we stand with that? Can you give us an update on that aspect?
We concur with the EAB's recommendation on hiring a forester. I think the work of a forester and an arborist are similar in many respects, but in many respects they're different. And I won't get into that tonight, but a part of it, having a more readily available kind of public-facing individual when it comes to our tree canopy is a great recommendation. And it's, as the staff knows, adding additional staff is not something I'm typically open to, especially when it's for a highly specialized position, because we already have a lot of that. But in this case, I think it makes a lot of sense. And I also want to mention, too, that the best communities, and I'm confident that Cary will be able to do this as well, can balance the needs of a tree canopy with its community's development goals. They do not have to be mutually exclusive. Just as we're able to play our role as both facilitator and regulator seamlessly in projects such as the mall redevelopment. And so I want to stress that to those who may be concerned that it'll make it more difficult to develop, but I think it can have the exact opposite effect.
Well, I appreciate that. So it sounds like we're moving forward on that pretty aggressively. I think the perspective I wanted to share is over the years, we can all kind of remember when we first got on, And, probably in less than 90 days, we had an issue regarding stormwater, somewhere in our district, somewhere in there. And, we'd always work with the staff, and it's, again, no disrespect to the staff. And the answer always seemed to be along the lines of, well, stormwater is complex, but we're working on it. And as this recommendation went forward, and in my conversations with the staff and with the town manager, my appeal has been that we all care about trees. They're kind of nice things to like. Let's just face it, they're nice. And I didn't want the tree recommendations to kind of fall into the category of, well, there's a lot of things to consider with growth and everything else, and but we're going to just keep working on it and do our best. Sean brought a new leadership to our community with challenging the staff and raising the bar. We talked about it with Fenton, and we just talked about it with the mall. And, what I shared is I want the hope to be that not only does the staff look at these recommendations, but they look at those best practices out there. They look at the culture of Cary, and they even come back and challenge us with a higher bar. They work with the EAB, and we work in collaboration to just make sure that it isn't any, let's just say, lip service, that we're really, really putting the genuine and sincere effort on. And in that discussion, the reality surfaced that if we're going to have a strategy, then we really need that dedication. We really need that focus and that energy. And when we looked at all those challenges that face us, the need for a very talented individual with a forestry background is absolutely critical. So I think that, I'm excited to hear the feedback from the staff tonight, and I'm excited to hear that we're going to move forward with a forester. And I think as we look at all of these initiatives that are being placed in front of us and driven by our EAB, that we have that dedicated resource that can work, throughout the town of Cary's organizations, and it'd be an integral part. Because I think Mr. Stiegel brought up a good point, and that is it's not mutually exclusive that we are aggressive with trees and a tree initiative, and that means that that's at the price of development. I think both can go forward in a smart and prudent way. So I just want to thank the staff. I'm really excited about that. And, I'm going to give some kudos to, Mayor Pro Tem Bush, because, she kind of had to drag me along a little bit on some of this stuff. And I've really appreciated her feedback and the legacy that she placed in our EAB organization, which made it a pleasure, when I was able to take over as liaison, to have such an energetic and wonderful group. So on a personal basis, thank you, Lori. And then I see some of the EAB members out there. Thank you for all you do. Scott Merkel's out there, and he chaired that. And I'm sure I'll forget the other names. So I just want to say thank you for the effort over the past years. I think we heard at Public Speaks Out tonight that somebody, and maybe what we have to do is encourage that speaker to talk to us a little bit more, and they'll find out that we're far ahead of some of the recommendations that person pointed out at Public Speaks Out, and far better than what some of our neighboring communities are doing.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. I'm going to go ahead and give my feedback real quick. It's not a lot. Of course, I want to know the financial and legal impacts of each recommendation. By the way, I think the recommendations are excellent. I'm all in for urban forester. I think that's a great idea. So, for example, do we have legislative authority to do certain things? I'm concerned when we set a goal for 56% canopy, are we talking about only public land? Because if we go to private land, can we spend public dollars on private land, that kind of stuff? What are our legal issues, and what are our legislative issues? Do we have to get specific legislation to do some of these things? So those are what I'm looking for, and maybe there are some decisions when we get the impacts back. So here's the high dollar impact, here's a low dollar impact, here's a medium, those kinds of things, looking for that as well. Options is what I'm looking for. But I'm definitely looking forward to moving forward with these recommendations and seeing if we can do all of them, or at least most of them. So, other comments?
Well, first, I'd also like to thank the EAB for their work. I think it was a really interesting idea, and I don't know who in the EAB, or maybe it was you, Jack, that came up with the idea of doing a book report on drawdown. Whoever had that idea was, it was fascinating, interesting, probably Rick Savage, my guess is. And I was really impressed to hear that Jack had read that book as well. And also participated in the whole leadership, has been a great leader and a great liaison to the EAB. For someone who is passionate about the environment personally, to let go of something that you love so much and put it in the hands of someone like Jack, who was really excited. He was very excited about taking on something that that was brand new. So I'm excited about that. I also want to thank the EAB for being so forward thinking. I often hear from Sean Stiegel that we care about our boards here at Cary more than the average local government does. And I think that this report and this set of recommendations actually shows that we do. And I am thrilled and excited to get the fiscal impact for these. And I also want to ask staff to go the one step further and see if there's some societal impacts that you can leverage in on that. There's recent studies have come out that said that trees make people happier, right? There's a lot of that type of research that's out there now that adds weight to it, not just the dollar value, but the quality of life value. And so I'm looking forward to seeing that. And I'm excited about this report. It was a fascinating 12-page read.
25 years, I'm yet to hear a citizen, I'd like to do this, yet to hear a citizen
meet person
complain about spending too much money on trees.
It hasn't happened.
Think about it. Have you ever had a complaint about spending too much money on trees? Nope. So we'll test that.
See if that can
How
happen.
far are you going to go?
How big a test?
Mr. Yerha?
Yeah, I'm continually amazed at the knowledge base that we have in our citizens. You throw a subject at them, and there are citizens out there who are experts on this kind of stuff. And not only is the knowledge base amazing, but they're willing to share that knowledge with the rest of us. So I really thank the EAB, especially the Tree Advisory Committee, for doing their work. I support the recommendations. I especially like hiring a forester. I like the idea of a tree inventory. Don't know how you go about that, but that's an interesting thought. And I really urge the staff to be aggressive in their review of the report and come back with an implementation plan as soon as they can. Of course, I want the staff to look at every word of the 14 pages, but as far as citizens are concerned, if you just don't want to go through all 14 pages, but just want to look at the first section called the value of trees, it's a real eye-opener. A lot of amazing stuff there. So thank you again for all your work.
Other comments?
I've not had official EAB connections, but I've probably met with several citizens groups that came and wanted to talk to me about trees, and I've talked with our manager Stiegel, and I think one of the interesting things that I think he's looking into, and it's not a part of this report, but it goes hand in hand, is that part of this cost offset might be offset with an arboretum of some sort that Cary and other towns have taken part in doing arboretum. I know we're looking into it, and so that may or may not be in the final stages of the report or recommendation back. But to know that we're considering whether we should be using some of our open land for some seedlings, and maybe that's the way that some of the costs are curbed by having our own arboretum. So I think that's been best practices I'm for, and I don't know if, is anybody up here else besides me have a Biltmore stick? That's what I wanted to ask you.
A Biltmore stick?
See, it's the forester in me.
A Biltmore stick?
Yeah, Biltmore stick. So at age 11, I went to 4-H forestry camp and got a Biltmore stick. So y'all can look it up, but But this is important. I think it's an important thing, and it's, I really do appreciate all that have put forward. I really do appreciate all those that have put forward the effort, and a great presentation, great 12-page read. Just, I'm excited about what we're doing in Cary.
Good. Other comments?
I would just echo the thanks to the EAB staff and everyone for all their work on this. You actually asked my question, so I'm not going to, but I actually appreciated hearing Ms. Bush's talk about the societal impact. That's something I actually really hadn't thought about. So, and I would actually agree. And whoever said trees make you happy, yeah, they do. So, good work.
Y'all laughed over some tree stories I remember at a meeting here at First Methodist. I mean, one of the, at White Plains Methodist.
Yeah.
It made you happy.
Make you laugh.
Yeah, we'll make you laugh.
Any other comments? All right, so we look forward to that report coming back to us. And with that, we're ready to go into closed session, and I'll recognize Mayor Pro Tem Bush for the motion.
Pursuant to GS 143-318, 11A 1 and 3, I move that we hold a closed session to consult with attorneys employed by and/or retained by the town in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege between the attorneys and the town. And among other things, the council expects to receive advice concerning the following lawsuits in regard to Memento Mori LLC, case number 18-04661-5-DMW, and to prevent the disclosure of information that is made privileged or confidential by GS 143-318-10E.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Discussion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously, and we're now going into closed session. We'll reconvene our council meeting. That concludes our business for the evening. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
There's a motion.
Second.
And a second. Discussion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries, and we are adjourned. Thank you.
This has been a production of Cary TV. Visit the Town of Cary's website at townofcary.org.